Welcome, Mark. Thanks for joining us today. Hi, Gary.
Hey, everyone.
Good to see you guys. Hello, everybody.
That's it.
Today would be a good chance to, introduce us all, as we've only sort of met briefly. Mark, I met you in Singapore Grand Prix, I think, and then the back to Formula E, wasn't it, in Hong Kong?
Hong Kong, yeah.
A while back.
Yeah, that first corner was quite interesting.
That's right. And Gary and I, we've worked a lot together in Hong Kong, and now Gary's based in Manila, so good opportunity to chat. And Mark, get your insights on some Formula One coverage, how you do it, and go from there.
Sure. Well, my career started in '83, believe it or not, 1983, a long time ago. I'm sure you guys weren't born, but
Definitely was.
Just, yeah.
But my father used to take me to the races back in the old days. Alton Park was my local track up in Manchester, and my brother started working for a young driver called Ayrton Senna da Silva back in those days in '81. So I went to that race, not as a photographer. I was still 16, but then I managed to get to a race when I was 18 because you couldn't get a pass till you're 18. And my first ever race was taking photos out the back. My brother said, go out the back of the circuit, just get a different angle. You'll be fine. So I ended up going out the circuit, going out to the back, and Senna and Brundle. Senna dived down the inside of Brundle and crashed in front of me. And I didn't have a sequence of it because I didn't have a motor drive. I had a click wind, the old film camera, one frame at a time. And I've got them side by side, which is quite a key moment. And then they landed on top of each other. Senna landed on top of Brundle's car, and he was very close to his head, actually. But then I've got these shots of him walking around the car, and that was the key moment of the season, really, because what happened after that was that Senna had done 10 races in a row winning, and then he started to crash a lot and got under pressure, and Martin really started to take control then, and then it went down to the last round at Thruxton. And I was actually there for that. But those pictures that I took at Alton Park were used and still are being used all over the world. So that was my early start. Then I went to work. I did a college course, actually, to learn the basics, lighting and everything. And then I got employed to work in a studio in Manchester. I was doing massive studio sets, though, for Case Catalogue, actually. We were doing, massive sets for bathrooms, kitchens, lounges, everything. I mean, huge, massive studio. And then we had a lab next door, which I also worked at. But my main work was actually not as a photographer, as an assistant. So I learned how to decorate, how to paint, how to light. It was a big learning experience. And then in '85, my brother asked me to come and join him, and we started and set Sutton Photographic, as it was in the beginning. And that was how I started, really. So that was my early part. And actually, I just posted the other day my first ever photo. My first ever race was at Silverstone. I was so enthusiastic, so keen. I went in the pouring rain out on the circuit in practice for some reason. I don't know why. But I had my motor drive with my Nikon cameras in those days. I think it was a Nikon,
F1.
probably F2. F2, I think it was. And Anthony Reid in this Reynard Saab hit somebody up the back and then barrel rolled in front of me. And I just kept my finger on the button. Didn't really have time to refocus. I did a little bit of manual focusing, but he landed in front of me in the gravel trap, got out of the car, everything was okay. But I was so excited, ran back to my car, drove back to the office and processed the film, as always in the old days, in a tank with chemicals. And then I looked at the sequence and printed 10 sets and took them back to the track the next day. And then on the Monday, gave them out to all the newspapers and magazines, as you used to do in the old days, by spec. And I got the Daily Express newspaper on the Monday, 5 frames used. So that was the start of my career.
Start of the career.
Yeah.
It's interesting about how you talk about going out in the rain and such as one of the things I've noticed when we shoot sports events is when people complain about the weather and stuff, and it's when we're shooting a race or an event, we see the rain as an opportunity for more dramatic shots. But it's just interesting how you mentioned it there, because I think that's a key thing that we can speak to other photographers or people coming up is like, you know, if you're passionate about this, then weather is the last thing on your mind, right? In the sense of, should I do it or not?
You just need to be prepared. I mean, I take my rain kit to every race around the world. I know it sounds stupid to take it to Abu Dhabi or even to places like Singapore, but there's always a chance it could rain. You know, in Singapore, we've had a few wet sessions over the years. There's always a chance, and certainly in Singapore because of the tropical climate.
Singapore and Malaysia are both the same, right?
Yeah,
sense.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to love Malaysia. I used to love the rain in Malaysia. I used to be laughing and smiling and joking. You know, even places like Spa. I remember destroying the D2000, one of the early digital cameras. I completely destroyed it because I took it in the rain without any covers, and it was like a $5,000 camera or $10,000 camera. I can't remember what it was. It destroyed the circuit board inside. But I used it in the rain, and I wanted to get the pictures, and it lasted the race. But after that, it was destroyed. They couldn't reply. I remember it was in the cupboard. The insurance company paid for it. But you want to be out there in the rain. It's spectacular. It gives you an opportunity to shoot something that you've not shot probably all year. And also, drivers are going sideways. Drivers are going to crash, possibly, you know, and you've got to look. Possibly the sun will come out even when the rain's out. Possible rainbow, possible backlight shots, possible spray shots. You've got to think outside the box, I think, in these sort of situations.
Yeah, definitely adds a lot of elements, doesn't it? But like you say, preparation is everything, which is, I guess.
And in some cases, I think there was a race, I can't remember which one it was last year, certainly last year, the Grand Prix. All the drivers, I mean, I generally start in the pits and then work out. Unless it's a particular session, I know it's sunny, I'll go out. But if it's a wet session, I think sometimes, because the drivers necessarily aren't going to go out, it's better to stay in the pits, because you can literally go from garage to garage to garage and shoot the drivers for the first time in the garage, talking to the engineer, having a joke at the back. Daniel Ricciardo in particular will come in and he's doing a dance as he comes in. He's high-fiving everybody. He's got this persona about him, and you can see that now on his Instagram. He's going completely bonkers at home, isn't he? And
he needs something to do, doesn't
he? Yeah, exactly, on his farm.
Like all of us.
I don't know where it is in Australia, but it's just a matter of going up and down that pit lane. People go on the pit wall to see if it's drying. You know, I can't remember which race it was, but it was an amazing race. And I just got an amazing set of pictures. Things like that just never happen, you know, and sometimes you look back and you think, Christ, that was an amazing session, you know, and you just smiles are all over your face. And now with digital, you sort of know, because you've sent it, you picked it, you've sent it back, you know, on the technology that we use now. We're transmitting all the pictures. So you can then go online and look what you've shot. But you know in your mind what you've shot. You know you've got some great pictures and that people will use them. So.
Christian, are you going to fire away with one of yours, or do alternates if you want with the questions?
Yeah, I'll fire one. I guess going on from what you've just said is, and this is probably a couple of questions in one, but the challenges that you face in Formula One now. I mean, a lot of photographers in motorsport generally are in similar spots. What challenge are you facing mostly now compared to maybe what you used to, or is it backdrops in your images? Is it access to areas?
I think you've just got to be lucky. I think most of the photographers around the world, sports photographers, they're always looking for a little bit of luck. I mean, they're always looking for a nice artistic angle, nice light, different light, whatever. But I think it's all down to a little bit of luck, but a little bit of knowledge as well.
Yeah, that was perfect timing there when you said looking for a bit of light, and his light went off.
My light goes off.
His bulb blew. Yeah, he's 99p bulb. Yeah. So you're at night, I'm at daylight. If you look out my window, it's beautiful. Yeah. Believe it or not,
just getting dark here.
Since we've had coronavirus, the weather in England has been the best weather we've ever had, probably in history. Because I think what's happened is we've got no pollution, and actually the skies are blue. That everything's clean. So going back to your question about picking the right angle, I mean, we've got such lovely sunshine. So I think while we're stuck at home, we've got to look for other opportunities. Things like sunsets. Obviously, people have been talking about the moon. People have been saying I haven't seen any shots of your Galaxy or your satellite shots yet. So we've got to look outside the box, I guess, a little bit.
Oh,
but
tonight.
Going back to your question, in terms of obviously picking the right angle, I agree. One particular shot that I took back in '93, obviously, is the flying fin where Nico Hakkinen went over the curb. But if you look back to that photo, there was 10 other people around me, but nobody else got it. So in my case, I was probably the only one that heard the screech of the brakes. And when he went over the curb, it was a split-second reaction. And obviously, it was a split second in terms of taking those three or four frames. And I looked round to everybody having taken it and asked them the question. One actually in particular was called Pascal Rondeau. I don't know if you know him, but he worked for Getty. He worked for All Sport. He was a really famous photographer, an amazing snapper from France. He didn't get it. He was shooting at 60th. I was shooting at 1/25th of a second, which is still quite slow.
Sure.
I was doing a pan photo. I'll show you what I was shooting when we go back. We'll show the sequence of what I took. So I've got a pan picture of what I took of Mika the lap before. And then obviously this lap, he came over the curb and just went in the air. But the TV didn't capture it. No other photographer captured it. So even though you're in the right place at the right time, you do have competitors. The other example is somewhere like, I remember Indianapolis, I think it was 2006, when Nick Heidfeld crashed almost like in the middle of the pack. So everyone's following necessarily the cars around the corner, because obviously at the start, you generally will follow the first corner, follow the cars around. In this case, Nick clipped, I think, with the McLarens and barrel rolled towards us. I was on the 70-200. Again, I just picked it up, literally just saw this car flipping, but luckily the autofocus picked it up. But there is a little bit of blur in the photos because I've got a bit of movement, but it's an amazing sequence. He's actually put his hands on his head like this. But again, there was probably 60 photographers around that corner, and I haven't seen anybody else who got it. I don't know why, but I think also people aren't maybe as prolific on social media and also in posting pictures as I am. But it is also about being in the right place at the right time. Another example is the Leclerc, where Fernando Alonso's tyre in the McLaren hit his halo. So this is the first year of the halo. And everyone criticised it for blocking the driver and saying it was a waste of time, it was ugly. But actually that halo saved his life. Don't know what the consequences would have been, but I've got the photo where the wheel is physically touching the halo. I didn't know that at the time because you are literally just keeping your finger 12 frames a second on that button. And I know a lot of people got that sequence, but whether they got that shot at that angle, I don't know. But it's an amazing
bit of luck, right? When you were saying before about your camera settings, do you try and be artsy and go, very slow shutter, or do you try and
I've seen from one Brazilian photographer, I can't remember his name now, Luca. That's it. He works in Brazil. He works for Car Magazine in Brazil, and he shot it on the 500. I think he was like 500. I was on the 70-200 with a converter because I'm always wary that you're going to be too tight. His one is literally full frame. It's beautiful and it's pin sharp, but it's cropping a little bit. And obviously, as Fernando came towards us, all this steam was coming out of his radiator after he crashed. And obviously, I want to get the whole sequence, them getting out the cars and everything. So sometimes it's nice to go tight. It's nice to go slow shutter speed, but it's a big risk. And if you're working for editorial content, like magazines, newspapers, websites, you want the picture. You don't necessarily want to be too arty. It's nice to do art. There's nothing wrong with doing art. There's nothing wrong with doing sparks. As I've got that really good shot of Max Verstappen in Germany last year where he sparked at the first corner, 20th of a second. But that is an incident where he's sparking. All I'm doing is the spark. If he'd gone off and crashed, I'd have missed it. But that's just the way it is. But to capture that shot was quite spectacular, and that meant something to me because he didn't get pole position. I think he came second, but it was his pole lap because he's flat out into the first corner, hits a dip, and bang, in the background coming towards me are those sparks. And trying to capture those at that sort of speed is very difficult. But sometimes it's about it's definitely being in the right place at the right time. sometimes taking a punt. As a freelancer like yourselves, I'm sure you've got some stories to tell about maybe as a freelancer, because that's where you can make your money. You know, as a staffer, I'm not going to make any more money getting a sequence or getting something exclusive. But you guys, you know, you can make the money. And maybe you should talk about maybe something where you were in the right place at the right time, Gary or Christian.
Well, Christian can talk about his experience in a sec about Macau. I just want to mention one thing for other, especially for learning photographers, based on what you just said there. Something that's come up a lot in my own experience is, it's always great to put on the 400mm and get that beautiful one shot. But as you said, that quickly develops into a non-shot if they're just a little bit closer than you'd like. And one of the things I find, like when I'm shooting for Getty for sports, is when I send the arty or the really tight images that you think as a photographer look great, compositions, they always say to me, we want it no angles, we want it straight, a little bit loose so we can crop it and all that. So it's like, it's quite hard sometimes as a photographer to create the more standard shot that the actual editors are looking for, rather than the bright, tight, upright or whatever.
I think Getty have quite strict restrictions though on what type of images they like to put out.
They hated my Dutch angles. They hated it. They kept sending them back. Stop sending them tilted. It's like I had to really think, you know, on an event. It's like, oh, that looks nice. Like, wrong. You really have to do that. Christian, you want to elaborate on your right place, wrong time, or wrong place, right time?
Well, looking back, Macau 2 years ago, I think it was, when Sophia Flores hit our bunker over 270 kilometers an hour or something. So again, I think it was at the time there was only 5 or 6 photographers of us in that main bunker when normally it's full.
I've been in there.
Luck is, you know, not as many photographers got injured as they probably would have on any other year. Why they weren't in there this year, I don't know. I had a feeling that corner always has some sort of fireworks, and that particular year was, you know, probably the biggest crash Macau's seen, and I was lucky enough to be there to capture it, which sort of helped my image, I guess, get out there a little bit. Like you said before, Mark, able to sell the images to different outlets, papers. So being in the right spot at the right time or the wrong time. I think, Gary, you said to me at that night, you almost have to sort of die to get recognized sometimes in the photography world, which was, it gives you a shake-up. But
I think as a freelancer, though, you know, even companies like ours, Motorsport Network, we are always looking for freelance people like yourself to push your pictures into our network. So, I mean, I get so many people after races, after incidents, contacting me and trying to sell me their sequences, which is fine. You know, I'm interested to see what content they've got and to see if it's got any value, because obviously we can push the pictures out like Getty to outlets as well around the world. And that's a key part. It's not just for motorsport.com or autosport.com. It's also to go out globally, you know, around the world. So we've got the potential to sell those images either on a 50-50, which we don't necessarily like to do nowadays. I mean, in the old days, we used to do a lot of 50-50 deals, but then it was the management of those 50-50 deals going to every magazine and then paying the people all the money. What we prefer to do now is just buy the image rights, not the whole image rights, not all exclusive. Well, not the buyout, as you could say. We would buy just the image rights for those pictures and the usage rights, you know, on a particular region or particular global buyout, whatever. And there's one guy in particular who's become sort of Mr. Crash, as they call him, Hassan Bratix from, I think it's from Bottas, from Germany. He's just been in the right place. I mean, his sequence last year in Monaco of Verstappen and Hamilton coming into the chicane after the tunnel is just unbelievable. He just took the risk. He just stayed out there. He said, I'm not going to go back and do the podium. I'm not going to do the celebrations. I'm not going to do the Parc Ferme. I'm just going to stay here because something's going to happen. And he was on that corner, and you've probably seen it. It was double page in F1 racing. It's an incredible sequence coming down. Verstappen tried to go down the inside of Lewis. He actually touched his wheel with the front wing. and Lewis missed the corner and carried on, but because there was the contact, he was allowed to keep the position. But it's an amazing. He also got the sequence of Daniel Ricciardo and Verstappen when they crashed in Baku. He got the Ericsson flip in Monza. It just carries on. This guy
sounds like the Grim Reaper of motorsports photography.
We should just follow this guy on the track.
You either want to be with him or you don't, right?
But we bought those sequences from him, and he's happy for us to buy them. He comes to me straight away and says, I've got this sequence, I've got this crash or whatever. And we do a little bit of a deal, and I buy on behalf of the network, as you could say, and they're happy to buy the sequences they have in their archive. Obviously, he can sell it still to other people. I mean, that's his right. I can't buy it exclusive for the world. He would want too much money. But so one thing I would say, just going back, I would say to the public out there, or the amateurs, or the punters, just keep shooting even from the position of the crowd. Because I think I bought a sequence of Lewis Hamilton crashing in the Nürburgring in that first year, 2007. And he went straight into the tyre wall like that in the air. An American photographer took it in the crowd and contacted me on email. And we bought that for $750. And he came back to me and said, oh, that was used in Lewis's book. He used 3 pictures. I said, well, yeah, that pays for what we got in terms of usage rights. He thought we made millions on this picture sequence. But, people sometimes don't have any idea of how much picture values are worth. I mean, those pictures, I think, were $250 per picture in Lewis's book. That was all we got. That was it. And obviously, there was a few other usages, but people think we make millions, and
those days are long gone, aren't they?
Pictures. Yeah.
All right. I've got another question for you here. So, do you have, off the top of your head, do you have a favorite image that you've taken in your career? And if so, what is it?
Well, I've already spoken about one.
Yeah.
That was my second year in Formula 1, 93. So that probably set me on the map. That made people aware of who I was, because, so like Christian there with that sequence from Macau, it sort of puts you on the map a bit, and it gives you respect from the other photographers. I guess my other set of pictures is a lot later. I mean, I took various other ones, and I can't, to be honest, remember them, because it's a long. There's lots. I mean, I've got loads of stuff of Michael, but the next sequence really, I'm guessing, was we had this great relationship with Jenson Button and supported him in his early career in Formula 4. We had the full car with Sutton on it. We then supported him in Formula 3, then went to Williams and Renault, so we didn't necessarily support him there. But when he won the World Championship in 2009, we go to Brazil, and he doesn't win the race, but he gets enough points to win the World Championship. I think he was 5th. And he's in Parc Fermé. So all we're concentrating is on him in Parc Fermé, even though I think Felipe Massa won the race, and he's on the podium and he's crying because he didn't win the championship. But Jenson basically runs then to Parc Fermé, hugs his trainer, runs into Parc Fermé. He's still got his helmet on. We can't actually see his physical face. So we're shouting at him, bawling at him from Parc Fermé. And then at the front, because Parc Fermé's got this sort of barrier of fences, like in MotoGP or bikes and other formulas. And then Jenson eventually takes his helmet off. He hugs his dad, who's in the corner. And we're still shouting at Jenson, get over here, and eventually comes up to me personally. And there's a great story. I dropped my 16-35 the day before and smashed it completely to smithereens. I then borrowed this 10mm, 10-14, I think it was, or 10-16 Sigma from a Brazilian photographer, Bito, good friend still. And I had that on my camera. I could then see him coming towards me. I threw my other body on the floor, the 70-200, knowing I didn't need it. I then pick up the camera, go to 10mm, and he's literally in my face. And it's literally like that. You'll see the pictures. So one is where he's like that, and his eyes are crazy. And then one, he's right in my frame at 10mm. It's unbelievable. And if I was on 16mm, it would have just been me like this, and the hands would have been out of frame. But because it's a 10mm, So then I take all those shots. I think not really much of it. And then in those days we had a technician. So I take my car down to the technician. So I've got some really good shots of Jensen in Parc Fermé. He picks the best, sends them back to the UK. We push them out to all the newspapers. That was it. And a few websites used them, didn't think much of it. And then the next day, so going back to the Getty story, the next day we're on the British Airways flight back to the UK. So overnight we fly back to the UK. I think it's like a 2 a.m. flight. And we're with the Getty Images photographers. And all they want to do is go and see in the newspapers what pictures of theirs are published in the newspaper. Yeah. And we go to the first paper, The Sun, my pictures, front and back, Mirror, Mail, Express, Observer, Independent, Times. Every newspaper used the set of pictures that we sent from that sequence. So I've got one picture of me with all the newspapers, but yeah, the Getty guys were so happy. Yeah, nothing went. But it was a good moment. And I then got the front cover of Autosport that week. It was used pretty much everywhere. And then went to see Jensen in Abu Dhabi, because Abu Dhabi was then the last race, 2009, which was actually the first race in Abu Dhabi. And I said, Jensen, would you mind signing the front cover of Autosport? He said, my eyes look crazy. I said, Jensen, remember when you won your first race in Hungary, 2006? Your eyes were just as crazy. I said, you just won the World Championship. What do you expect? So it's, it's all about emotions, but it's sometimes about knowing the person, knowing the driver, having just the, the clout a little bit to shout at the driver and get his attention, because sometimes it is about the eye contact, and also it's having the right lens at the right time. I was very, very lucky to have that 10mm, because I wouldn't have got it. And actually I've got some other shots that are from above, because behind us there's a podium tower much higher, and they were all shooting Jensen as he ran across. And you can see my camera with the flash on top with the Sutton logo, and you can see that it's coming right for me. And the other photographers aren't there. There's quite a few team members. So that is a memorable, probably one of my most memorable sequences in terms of shooting that Jensen and then getting the publications afterwards as well. So the knock-on effect of how having those images transmitted back, not from the camera in those days, but transmitting them from the track directly back to the UK, then pushing the pictures out around the world can really.
It's nice how the stars align with regards to the lens at the time as well. Just sometimes like that, right?
Yeah. When I think back, I wouldn't have got that sequence. No way, it's just impossible. I get so many people asking me, how do I get into Formula One? But I always say to them, it's not, the step isn't straight into Formula One. You've got to learn your trade. Christian, for example, is doing that Formula 3 at Macau, or Formula E, or whatever he's doing in Hong Kong. There's not a lot of motorsport there, so you've got to go outside the box a little bit. So, obviously you've got Zhuhai, you've got obviously quite a lot of tracks in China, but obviously you can't always cover Formula One. So I always say to people, if you're going to start in any form of motorsport, for sure in Europe, it's got to be karting, and then just work your way up, really, because karting is bloody quick. Actually, to be honest, if you can be good at karting, you can probably be good at Formula One, because it's so bloody quick. But
like you say, the dream for photographers are, I've got to get to F1, but like you say, taking those steps before is the key. Right?
I obviously started back in the 80s and obviously didn't come to Formula One until 92, so things are a lot different. But we can talk about it if you want.
People, it's also a society thing these days, where I think people just expect, like, you're shooting for Ducati, how do I shoot for Ducati? It's like, you don't just get the job, you don't just walk in and get it, where it's this whole instant gratification. A lot of people think, well, if I've bought a 400 2.8, I've got a 1DX, why can't I get in? It's like, well, that's like the smallest part of the equation is the gear, right?
Yeah.
But that's life.
It's
probably going to upset a few people when they watch that comment. Age between.
Maybe now to talk about that. What about social media or Instagram? Have you found you're changing your shooting methods maybe to match Instagram, or I don't know, maybe
my Instagram's a mix of my life, but also it's not all about. Some people just put up motorsport pictures and that's fine. Everyone's to their own, but I prefer just to show my life and not necessarily just what I'm doing. Obviously now I'm not doing anything because I'm posting old pictures, but obviously I'm posting a lot of food. I'm posting lots of different things, and that's what people like, really. I mean, it's more about the interaction. Certainly on Instagram it's more about the interaction. It's more about I reply to everybody that sends me a message, and I always continue to do that because, where possible. But because I like to keep the interaction with the fans. If they want to come up and say hello to me at a race, that's fine. I don't mind. Or want to have a chat.
I think that's very good advice for anybody who's.
I'm not
how
like
well
some of the drivers who can be a bit off, with the people, because I can understand that they're in a different situation where they're busy with media commitments and obviously engineering meetings and various whatever sponsor stuff, and we haven't got that, so we're fine. But so I don't mind chatting to them about photography. But
so to touch a bit then, just what it's like in a day in your shoes, just if we can not obviously go overboard on it, but maybe to give an insight.
Well, we can talk about Melbourne if you want. Mix the two together. I mean, I can talk about Melbourne because obviously Melbourne, I did start working on the Tuesday. So if you want me to go and talk about Melbourne, because obviously I picked up my pass on the Tuesday and then I was working. It wasn't like I was sat on the beach. I did actually go for a walk into St Kilda, but because obviously the media accreditation didn't open until 2:00. But anyway, we can talk about that if you want as well. But it's up to you.
Do you think Gary's at work, or go to your?
Yeah,
go do the end part first.
I'm recording it already, so I can chop it a bit if we need to.
He's recording already. He hasn't told us.
Sorry.
I can see the button at the top. I thought we were just having a chit chat.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, we can. I'll cut this bit out and then go from there. Sorry. So I like that comment there. You talk about for photographers who completely unrelated to motorsports, but when I teach workshops, I teach travel photography workshops, right? And of course, one of the main things people talk about is gear. Everyone's obsessed with gear. I mean, we love gear as well, of course, but we understand that it's a tool rather than, it's gonna, if you don't have the right camera, blah, blah, anyway. But one of what you just said there, and I think is very, very useful comment, is about being humble. And that, whether that's talking to fans, talking to subjects, like if I go to India or something and people say, oh, how'd you get that shot? It's like, you know what, you've got to be humble as a photographer.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking to the client, to, Lewis Hamilton, to homeless people, whatever it is, doesn't matter. You've got to have the same attitude about the way you're working. That will create an authenticity, right?
A typical example was last year in Canada. I'm just in the pit lane, just looking for a few detailed pictures, nothing spectacular, nothing in particular. And then Valtteri Bottas just walks out the garage and he's just doing a few pictures on his phone outside the garage. And then he goes on the pit wall and I just followed him. He leaned out, so I did the picture of him leaning out. It was nothing special. And then as he come off the pit wall, he wanted to have a little chat. So I went up and had a chat. I said, how have you been? Where have you been? He said, I've been to Calgary and I'm enjoying the city. And he showed me a few pictures on his mobile. So, amazing. Oh, brilliant. He said, and then he goes, he says to me, could he take my picture? And I'm thinking, it was a bit of a shock at first. And I said, yeah. And I'm thinking, we've just done the picture of him leaning out. That would be my picture because it's just easy. He's there, lean out, but there's no background. It doesn't really tell you that you're in Canada. And I'm then under pressure because I don't really know what to do. And I immediately thought, well, there's the sign on the start-finish line that says Salut Gilles, which, it's the Gilles Villeneuve circuit. And I thought that's the shot. But is he going to walk all the way down the pit lane, over the pit wall, and walk all the way down the track? So, well, I'll ask him. I said, would you want to do the shot with the sign on the start? Yeah, I'll do it. And then I look round and there's actually no other photographers, there's no other TV crews, there's nobody, it's just me and him. So we walked down the pit lane, over the pit wall, walked back down the track, and then take these sequence of pictures of him with the sign. And I said, can you kneel down? He said, yeah, stand up, yeah, arms crossed, yeah. And I did some with all focus, and I did some with a sharp depth of, with a real small depth of field, so it knocks it out a little bit. Standing up, crouched down. Took a couple of minutes of his time. We walked back. He said, "Can I have a look at them?" I said, "Yeah, there you go. Oh, they're great. Can you send them to me on email?" And he gave me his email address, and I sent them over to him, and he used them on his Instagram. But it was just a bizarre situation.
Yeah, but it's a great example.
Most photo shoots, you've already decided what you're going to shoot and where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And when someone hits you like that with a shot, and then you're under pressure, because then it's your reputation, isn't it, as a Formula One photographer, to come up with the goods as well. It's not just
want to get it right.
There's quite a few things in place. Pick the right angle, get the right lens, choose the right subject, choose the right background. Because you want it to be clean, you want it to be a nice photo for him to use. Otherwise, if it's a pile of rubbish, he won't use it. So that just came to mind there when you were talking about, also again about having the right lens at the right time and utilizing what you've got in terms of what's in the camera. So it doesn't always have to be at 5.6 f8 or at f11 and everything's sharp. Shoot some at 2.8, or if it's a 1.8 lens, shoot them at 1.8 lens. So just get your eyes sharp and the rest out of focus. So it's utilizing what you've got. And that's a real big part of the job.
Yeah.
And you see
working
people now.
Around your subject.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people are shooting at these low depth of focus. It's very difficult, and it does take a lot of skill. And in most cases, you won't use it. But in this case, with a portrait, it works perfectly well. And you could see the difference when I look back at them. I prefer the low depth of focus shot because it's just blurred it out a little bit. It's got the first corner just disappearing into the background. But you don't always. We're talking before about long lenses, and I don't think you need to buy a brand new long lens. I mean, eBay is a great place to buy kit. Obviously, your local camera shop will be the first place to go because you can feel and touch it. You get the warranty. The problem with eBay sometimes is that you don't know whether it's been damaged. You don't know the quality of that lens. So I guess the local second-hand camera shop, or I went to B&H in New York this year, and the set of kit they've got there is just mind-blowing. But it's not always about having the long lens. You could, as we talked about before, Gary, and I'm sure Christian's the same, my bread and butter lens is the 70-200. I use it for the start a lot. I use it for portraits. I use it for pan shots. And then you can add the converter. You get the 1.4 or the 2x converter. And the sharpness of those two converters are just incredible. So you're then giving yourself almost a 300 or a 400 mm lens, even with that small lens,
I find that's the most versatile lens for us. I think even for the bikes as well. I mean, the bikes are a bit smaller, and we do like to use the 400 prime.
Yeah.
But we also again, when people ask us, one of the things with that, I mean, it's just out of people's price range is half the problem, right?
Yeah.
And it is kind of a, sorry.
Yeah, I think with MotoGP, it's generally the 4, 5, or 6 because, like you say, you are smaller in the frame. I mean, Gareth Harford is a photographer I've used, and Patrick Lundin was a guy who worked for Golden Goose. Patrick was a photographer for Formula One for 4 or 5 years. He loved the 600, and he carried it back into Formula One and used it all the time. And then Gareth is very similar. Gareth is a 600 shooter, and he asked me in Monaco, should I bring my 600? And I said, don't bother. Also, Nikon will be there in Monaco, so you can always borrow a 5 or 600. He said, should I bring the 3? He was even asking, should I bring the 300? I said, yeah, bring the 3 because it could be a rainy, dull weekend in Monaco. You just never know. But because you've got a 2.8, it's worth having, maybe shooting in the tunnel with a 300 2.8. But the 70-200 in the tunnel is just as good,
With the Formula E, we've noticed, and I think I was talking to Simon last time, who you work with a lot, was saying,
Simon Galloway, yeah.
Basically get around the track with a 70-200 and a 1635 or 2470, and you're set for the day. It covers, garages, pit lane, track.
I think with Formula E it's very different though, because they're generally in cities, and what you want there is you don't necessarily want a tight shot. You want the backdrops. You want the skyline of Manhattan. You want Manhattan. You want Kowloon in the background, Kowloon Island. You want the cityscapes, you want the buildings. So you're going to need the wider lenses. You're going to need the 70-200. To get a tight-in lens, it could be shot anywhere, couldn't it? I mean, exactly. It's going to be a concrete wall with a banner in the back, the sponsor in the background.
Yeah, my favourite images of Christians from the Formula E are all the wide shots where you can actually see the city behind.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, certainly Hong Kong. You know the wheel they had, the wheel that was on one of the corners or in the background. Anyway, that was a great picture. All right, you've got sponsor boards and you're limited there. They did restrict it because the sponsors were everywhere, more than Formula One, and almost going 9-12 foot high in some cases. Yeah. And obviously the holes they had were very limited. So, I mean, in some cases you were shooting through fence just to get the right angle because they didn't put the hole in the right place. And that can be a problem for photographers as well, where certainly on new tracks or street tracks, the holes are never in the right place because a photographer's not worked with the FIA or the organisers, and they haven't put the holes in the right place. So
the biggest complaint, isn't it?
Yeah, it is our biggest bugbear, as they say. But places like we go to Sao Paulo, where other else? We go to Malaysia. There's less restriction there in terms of the fencing, and it's great to get. I mean, I saw quite a lot of pictures from a guy called David Gibson, who was shooting in Barcelona, and he was just a punter shooting behind me in most cases. He got some amazing shots considering he's not a pro. And secondly, I think he's David Gibson Photography on Instagram. And the guy shot some incredible pictures from a public area. I mean, maybe he's cropped them all up. And obviously on Instagram, you don't know how sharp they are, but his angles you can see he's been looking at the photographers and what they're shooting. And he's gone out there from a public point perspective, behind us or higher up, and he's taken some amazing shots. And also using the light as well. You can see we're shooting late at night, because obviously in Barcelona, they run till 6 o'clock in the evening. You haven't got necessarily a sunball in the background, but you have got the low light, the golden light. So you see the photographers all out on the circuit, right to the last minute shooting till that last second of the day at 5:59 and 59 seconds. That they're out there at the chicane or the back of the track. And he was out there as well. He knew what he wanted, like we did, and he's still posting those pictures on Instagram.
Oh, we'll pull up his Instagram and take a look at that as well. Sounds good.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's amazing. I mean, he's obviously got some good kit, and I have spoken to him. He has got some good kit, but he's just learned. He's gone and seen what I shoot or other photographers are shooting, and he's learned from the angles, and that's a clever part as well. Not just thinking that you can do your own thing. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I'm not saying that isn't something you should do, but learn with what other people have got out there. Go and look on Google. Go and look in magazines. Yeah. It's the old way of shooting, but we all learn from that, and then we maybe go in a different direction. There's lots of artists out there like Darren Heath, and obviously Sakurai is posting a lot of pictures now from his early career. He started about the same time as me in the 90s. And a lot of these guys are posting a lot of their old pictures. Atsuta is an amazing photographer, very artistic, and very Japanese style in the way he shoots everything. Very, very, very dark, all these pictures, underexposed pictures, and very artistic, very, very slow shutter speed photos. He's posting now from, I think, 92 and 93 at the moment. Go and look at his Instagram as well. It's just amazing. Darren, obviously, he's a legend in his own way. Shooting a lot of art, was working for F1 Racing, and was able to experiment, and by only working for that one publication was able to just concentrate on the artistic side, but obviously shooting a lot of portraits as well. And he's still a good friend.
Certain style, hasn't he, Darren? To his
I mean, there's still great camaraderie with all these photographers. There's a lot of English photographers in Formula One, and there's still quite a few Japanese and Italians, and French. And we all get on really well. We're all after the same pictures. We're all trying to out-psych each other with different angles and different shutter speeds, and try and create art. And it's good fun. I mean, I recognise. I mean, there's a great French photographer. I don't know if you know him, Florent. He's a great photographer, shooting a lot of great art. But he's again under pressure to shoot normal pictures as well, because he works for DPPI in France, and they've got to have some normal pictures as well. You know, not just all art. So it's got to be. I mean, I'd say for the new photographers that are coming into the sport, just motorsport, I would say my personal opinion is start at the bottom. You know, start shooting karting or any. Obviously, there's no sporting going on at the moment, but any sporting event. It doesn't have to be motorsport. It could even be your local football match, your local rugby match, cricket. Obviously, you need approval because you're shooting people, and in some cases, you've got to be careful if you're shooting young kids because the parents will get upset. But maybe go along to one of those, the bike events or the motocross events, and just try and get accreditation at one of them, because they're probably going to be easier than trying to get accreditation at Formula One. And then once you've started taking pictures every weekend, or even just shooting wildlife, I mean, there's so much wildlife at the moment. I've got, various birds and kites flying above me here. Not kites as in flying kites. I mean, as in a bird, the kite, looking for prey. And it's incredible to see them just swooping above, looking for mice and stuff in the fields. But they're incredible to shoot at the moment. So things like that, just keep shooting. The key is, when we get back to racing photography now, we're going to be very rusty because we've not been shooting for a long time. And I do find that you don't shoot, you do get rusty. So it's great to go to Barcelona and do those 2 weeks before we go to Melbourne. And then, just start in the lower formulas and then just build yourself up, build your reputation up. Maybe go in a particular direction. Maybe only shoot portraits. Maybe everything up 1.8 or 2.8 or whatever. I don't know, whatever you want to do. And then experiment. Because when you're in those younger formulas, you're not shooting for anybody. You can experiment as much as you like. Drop the shutter speed, get an ND filter for going on your lens. That means you can drop the shutter speed down to 1/4 of a second, 1/2 a second. Get right down there. I mean, just experiment, with light. And also when the sun starts setting at night, maybe on your walk, your social distancing walk, or your cycle, take your camera with you and just stop for a second and shoot some wildlife out on a river or a reservoir. We're very lucky we've got a reservoir near here, and I've been out a couple of times, excuse me, when it's been really beautiful sunrise or sunset, and shot some swans or ducks and things like that. But it's a way of learning. That's what I think. It doesn't matter if it's motorsport. At the end of the day, you're learning about light. You're learning practice. Yeah, exactly. Practice is the key part of it. And
any of the photographers in Manila, I'll have to tell them they can't do anything unless they can shoot it out the window, because we're not even allowed out of our condos. Not allowed outside.
There's one guy on TikTok. There's one particular guy I saw on TikTok. He's been shooting everything from his balcony.
Yeah.
But he's been experimenting with things like reflection. So getting your camera and angling it and using that there as a reflective. So putting your phone on here and using that reflection, or shooting through particular things, I can't find anything at the moment, but shooting through even like my hand, or shooting through an
shapes
object.
And light reflection.
Well, shapes, yes. Someone's cut out a heart and obviously stuck that onto a lens and then shot that against people with the low depth of focus. Using water. I mean, I know it sounds stupid, but spray of water.
Just being creative.
Things like that. I've got a fan here. Maybe some leaves. Just things like this. You've got to think outside the box. But TikTok at the moment is going completely crazy.
It's gone
with
crazy
these
here.
Experimental photographers that are just amazing what they're coming out with. And I've been scrolling through the last few days and picking out my favourites. It's been incredible. Some clever people out there from all over the world, in India and Pakistan, and this guy I think's in Russia, and there's some crazy people. And then obviously we're in lockdown, so we can't do very much. But
your thoughts on the esports, Mark? There's a couple of, or one in particular photographer, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he had the creative idea of screen capturing the esport races. He's a motorsports photographer, and we'll find out his name at some point. But I thought that was really actually creative, and he's thinking.
Well, I did it. I did it for the first Formula One race in Melbourne.
Okay.
You probably didn't see me, but I was there. Because I had my pass and I had my tabard. So I put my tabard on and shot it in my lounge with the camera kit.
Yeah.
That went viral on my Instagram and got the most likes. I didn't even shoot the picture. My daughter shot it. It got 6,500 likes. And
Could be
Sky
how
Sports
it's going to go, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sky Sports used it. I mean, Mercedes Formula One team used it. It's just, I just wanted to show my commitment to the sport. And I think that's what it's also about. Just going back to your talk about, you know, how people get into the sport. It's also about passion as well. You need to have a real big passion for the sport, passion for photography, because why else would you go out there like I did in the rain, you know, in my first ever race? Why else would I do this job for 35 years? You know, you've got to have a passion for the sport. You've got to love what you want to do. And you've got to love to take really artistic, beautiful pictures. And when they come out, like the Button sequence or whatever, the Leclerc crash, or you've got to just think, wow, it's great to be here, great to take these pictures. And I think that's what it's key to it, really. Having a passion.
Yeah, passion's definitely key of anything to do with photography, I think, isn't it?
Exactly.
Leading on from that, if you can just fill us in quickly on what it's like in a day of your life at a F1 track for people who maybe haven't shot motorsport, or you know, some people look at it, it's very, very glamorous. But as a photography point of view, it's not so glamorous sometimes, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, going back to Australia this year, obviously it was already a long week. I did 4 days, even without the Grand Prix happening. So I arrived, just to give you an example of what happened in Australia, I arrived there on the Tuesday morning. I arrived in at 6:30. I actually got the bus. I didn't get a taxi like most people. I got the local bus to my bus, to the bus stop outside my. It wasn't a hostel or anything. It was an apartment, but it was very opposite the track, so it was very close. I then obviously went and got changed, because obviously I'd done a 24-hour flight, and then obviously thought about what I'm going to do for the rest of the day. Went for a nice walk down to St Kilda Beach. Then obviously at 12 o'clock there was the pass collection for the Formula One passes, so I was able to collect my pass for 2020, which was great. Whether I'll actually ever use it again is another story. And then I thought, I may as well go to the circuit. So I met one of the other local photographers, John Toscano, who works with us in Australia. He'd done already a couple of days of all the freight arriving. And he said that the freight's still there on the circuit. So I said, well, let's go to the track. So we went into the circuit, showed our passes, went walking around, did a few pictures of obviously the freight on the circuit. And then I got told to wear a high vis. That's the laws of Australia. You need to wear high vis. So I ended up putting a high vis on, which I've still got. I brought it back. I didn't give it back. And then Charles Leclerc turned up with his girlfriend. So again, totally out of the blue. Totally didn't expect it. Didn't expect any drivers on the Tuesday. Turned up with his girlfriend, his manager, and his trainer. And they got some great shots of them coming in with the helmets on, talking. Went into the hospitality. Then they went in the garage. I thought, oh, what are they going to do now? And they went out on the track on the bike. So I got them on the circuit. And then they went off. And I got some really good pictures of those. All went back. I was the only photographer there, no other photographers. Got some shots of the freight, got some shots of the paddock. And then I thought, right, it's time to go now. And then back in on the Wednesday. So Wednesday is then like our Thursday, because in Australia, they have a 4-day weekend. So literally there's cars running on a Thursday, like no other race really. And so the drivers have to do their track walk on a Wednesday. So Wednesday is going to be a busy day. We know that. And then I go out into the circuit, wait for the drivers to sort of come to me really down the end of the pit lane. And then I see these bikes at the end of the pit lane talking to the stewards and the security, think nothing of it. And then some of the photographers say, no, it's a nobody. I don't know who they are. So I just fire it off anyway. And it's Bottas, it's Valtteri Bottas. And he actually waved to me, but I didn't see it on the sequence as he came past. And actually, when I look back again, he's actually riding a Mercedes bike in all the Mercedes kit with his blue and white. So that was a great set of pictures. And then you had Alex Albon was on Netflix. So Netflix obviously doing this Drive to Survive series. He's mic'd up, so he's got his mic here, and they've got the boom arm over as well, so they can pick up all the engineers talking. So that was a good set of pictures down the first corner and let them carry on, really. So I did that pretty much with all the drivers. Excuse me, got a few more freight shots, a few pit lane shots, and then really that was it again. Then Thursday, another day. Thursday I knew was going to be a hell of a day, because although by that point, actually what had happened is the social distancing had already come into place. So that was a bit sad really, because then you knew you weren't going to get the drivers doing the autographs, which was a bit of a shame, because they built this Melbourne walk literally for autographs and for fans to meet the drivers. So that was a bit sad. Only one person did it, and that was Zach Brown, which he shouldn't have probably been doing. But anyway, because by that point, we eventually found out that one of the McLaren mechanics had got the virus. So the day was busy, because obviously I was doing all the driver portraits. So I spent 3 hours doing the driver portraits. And not only that, I set it up as well. So we put 2 umbrellas over the top, 2 massive umbrellas to shield all the light, because we didn't want to have shadow on the drivers' faces. We put the backdrop up, and then we set up our seat positions. About 30 to 40 photographers were able to shoot every driver against a lovely black background, even light, because you haven't got that flare coming off. It was just lovely, even. And also you could set your exposure and it will be the same for everything. So did all those for 3 hours. Then it was into the press conference, which was amazing, because obviously Lewis came out with his quote, "Cash is king," which is what all the journalists wanted, talking about the virus, talking about what's more important. Is it Formula One or is it people's health? And obviously he decided that cash was more important than health. So, because we were all there in Australia knowing that this virus could spread if someone got infected. We eventually found out that evening that McLaren guy got infected. McLaren pulled out that evening, and then it kicked into Friday. We went for dinner that night with my other photographers, and we pretty much decided that evening, having seen the statement from McLaren, we were going to get up very early. So we were pretty much up at 6, left our apartment at 6:30. I've got shots of me going to the track in the dark, believe it or not. Got the sunrise coming up on the iPhone as well as the camera. And then pretty much we went back to the media room. Nobody was in there, just us. Set up my computer and said, we're just going to have to shoot everything that happens. We don't know what's going to happen. They're probably going to cancel it. Maybe they'll carry on. We don't know. Maybe behind closed doors. And literally we just shot everything that was going on. So there was still freight arriving. Red Bull had freight arriving. It's just bizarre. Anyway, so we did the freight arriving. All the mechanics arrived. They were getting coffees. There was one Williams mechanic with a mask on, which was quite an interesting picture. And then there was people going into the paddock, and then eventually it came out that possibly it's going to be cancelled. I had one Australian friend of mine who lives in Melbourne. He said, "I'm going to go now." I said, "Oh, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Gate 1. I said, "I'll come with you, see what's going on." He said, "I think it's going to be cancelled. I think the Premier's already come out and said no one's allowed in, even though the public possibly don't know yet." Went to Gate 1, lots of thumbs down pictures, chatted to quite a lot of people, English people, Germans, Russians, lots of different languages. But there was thousands of people there all together, not even social distancing, because at that point, you didn't really know. Carried on shooting, police then turned up, guy with a tannoy, told all the public, they all disappeared. But there were some great pictures, just to really shoot it as an editorial photographer, as a news photographer, like, the guys from Getty would have been doing the same. But I just felt like that was my job for that particular point, that 2 or 3 hours. And then obviously I got back, and then there was the press conference at 11:30. And then that was pretty much it, all over. And then it was all about getting back to England, really. So it was completely different than a normal weekend. Obviously, I still did what I felt like was 3-4 days of work. But yeah, it's full on. I mean, it's literally like that every Grand Prix, to be honest. Not as much because you don't do the portraits, but it is pretty much full on. There's lots of media activities, lots of sponsor events. And I was looking forward to the cars being on track, really, like the public were. It's so sad not to see them going out on the circuit. But at least I experienced Barcelona and 2 weeks of that and 6 days of testing. So that was great to see them.
How quick everything changed, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so sad, really. I mean, those cars, I did actually say, so that night I went back to my room and edited the pictures, did a live Instagram story. And I said then on the live Instagram story, these cars need to be continued to 2021. That was my quote then. And I wrote it down in my notes in my phone. And I said the delayed on the new regulations coming in, because there's no point spending loads of money. We're going to have no money, and the teams realised that, FIA realised that, and obviously that became apparent that they needed to put those cars in for 2 years, like Formula E has, I think, a 3-year time run, and they were about to introduce their new car, weren't they, Christian? So
yeah, they were.
Yeah, so it's great that they've done that, and obviously we're all I'm on furlough at the moment for my company. A lot of the Formula One teams have gone on furlough because the government in England is thankfully supporting us all. They don't want to see everyone go and be made redundant. So we're very lucky in that sense. But I'm here at home, self-isolating, staying here at home and washing my hands regularly. Yeah. And we're looking forward to some racing. The great news is the British government is working on 2 vaccines, which we're very hopeful to have ready, hopefully in September. The government is piling some serious money into 2 different directions. So we're very hopeful that Oxford University and another establishment is working on these 2 different viruses in 2 different directions, and that one of them out the 2 will work and we can get back to normal life. Because once we have the vaccine, I think then we'll be on the road to recovery.
Yeah. No, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you very much for your insights, and
no problem.
Hope everyone watching sort of enjoyed a touch on what you do and how you do it.
Yeah,
and
sure.
If there's some more questions out there, perhaps we can meet again and go from there.
Yeah, we can talk again. No problems. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
See you soon.
Stay safe.
Cheers.
Take care.
My pleasure.
Cheers, Christian.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks
Thank you. Bye.